Welcome back. It's good to see you again. That right there was just a reminder to get up and move around if you haven't already. Pause this, stretch out, move places, do whatever you need to do. But we're going to start our section on engagement by reflecting on your experiences as a teacher and learner. Remember, that's a very high yield strategy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little time to describe one of your most engaging learning experiences as either a teacher or a learner. You're going to describe one of your least engaging learning experiences as a teacher or a learner. And then we're going to think about what were the key differences in instructional design between these experiences. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to engage with that. You will be sharing these a little bit later, and then after we learn about the engagement strategies or the types of engagement and the types of relevance, you're going to be pulling from that with a partner. So make sure you describe them well enough that you'll remember them, and here we go. Thank you for engaging. Throughout the rest of this part, when we talk about engagement and relevance, I really want you to be thinking back to those most and least engaging learning experiences to start to think about what types of engagement you were engaging in and how those learning tasks were either relevant or not relevant to you. So now we're going to move on to our third learning target for the day's PD, and that is I design learning experiences around learner engagement. And a really important question coming in the next couple months, in fact, maybe next week, is how do we design distance learning experiences around student engagement? We know that student engagement in distance learning environments is going to be huge for students learning. And we talk a lot about positive effects, but today we're going to talk just a tiny bit about boredom. Boredom has a negative 0.49 effect size. But let's start by defining engagement. Hattie Fisher and Fry in the Distance Learning Playbook help us to define engagement better by teasing it out to 3 different dimensions. Behavioral engagement is the one that we most commonly talk about. Cognitive engagement, which is psychological effort, challenge, and self-regulation. And emotional engagement, which really has to do with engagement based on interests and relationships. So just to tease out what you think these might look like, we're going to give you 2 minutes to think about what are the observables, what are students doing when they're behaviorally engaged, when they're cognitively engaged, and they're emotionally engaged. So we're going to give you 2 minutes to think about what are the things that you're seeing when kids are behaviorally engaged, what are the things you're seeing when students are cognitively engaged, and what are you seeing when kids are really emotionally engaged in learning? You have 2 minutes to think about those observables. Here we go. In the distance learning playbook, Fisher, Hattie, and Fry really break the engagement down into 3 dimensions. And those are really important to understand so that we can design learning around those types of engagement, as well as our environments. So when we think about behavioral engagement, that's probably the one we most commonly describe. Students are doing observable academic actions. They're following rules, they're complying, they're completing worksheets, they're reading the chapter, they're doing school. Oftentimes that can be rote and shallow, even though it is important. They're complying with the teacher requests. When students are cognitively engaged, it's different. They're showing psychological effort. They're showing challenge, and they're showing the ability to self-regulate. We see them planning for problem solving, planning for process. We see them goal setting and self-monitoring. We see them problem solving. When students and scholars are emotionally engaged, we're looking for that interest, that affect, that relationships. So when students and scholars are emotionally engaged, they're discussing and questioning. They show curiosity, and they're seeking help, often in the form of feedback. So I want you to think back. In the beginning of this, we asked you to think about your most engaging times as a learner and teacher. We asked you to think about your least engaging times and think about the difference. And oftentimes, the difference lies in cognitive and emotional engagement. When we think about the continuum of engagement, you can be either actively disengaged or actively engaged. And the factors that we just looked at, you can see really lie on this active engagement. In fact, behavioral lies more in that passive engagement, the doing the work, the paying attention, the responding to questions. But then higher up on the active engagement scale, we're looking at how students are investing in and driving their learning. They're asking questions, they're valuing it, they're setting goals, they're seeking feedback, they're self-assessing. So I really want you to think back to those least and most engaging experiences that you've had, and just take a look at this chart and think about, is this what was happening? Do you see the elements in your most engaging experience? And did you see yourself maybe having those active disengagement strategies in your least engaging experience? Just gonna give you a minute to think about that. So when we think about designing around those types of engagement, there are some design principles that Hattie, Fry, and Fisher suggest. Encouraging students to think more in more than one way, going from closed to open tasks. Instead of one answer, there could be many. Example, pose problems to students that can be solved in multiple ways. Another design principle is move from understanding by requiring students to connect and relate. Example of this might be to compare and contrast two phenomena, to identify rules and patterns in some data sets, and to figure out when seemingly dissimilar ideas are actually related. Also, ask students what they think first rather than telling them what they will need. An example of this is ask students what might work best to resolve a problem, such as a dilemma a character in a story is facing, before reading what the character did. Another design principle is position students to plan a way forward by moving from procedure to problem solving. An example of this might be providing them insufficient information at first, giving them only some of the steps, or including some irrelevant information. So the next thing we want you to do is get together with some of your colleagues and start to think about what are some of our most effective strategies when we think about increasing cognitive and emotional engagement in our scholars. We're going to take about 10 minutes to start to talk specifically about what are some of your strategies that you use to get students planning, goal setting and self-monitoring, problem solving. How do you get them discussing and questioning? How do you get them to seek feedback? And how do you really get them to show that curiosity? How do you up cognitive engagement? We're gonna give you 10 minutes to discuss some real concrete strategies that you use to share with other colleagues to onboard those things, and really think about what kind of teaching moves do you use in your classrooms that increase cognitive and emotional engagement in students. You have 10 minutes. Here we go. So one great example of increasing relevance and engagement with our scholars is really around the use and the way that we interact with information. There's so much of it out there. And when we think about information, we can increase relevance and engagements by thinking about the function and changing the why of how they engage with information. So there are 4 basic functions in the ways that students engage with information. They're finding information, they're using information, they're creating information, and they're sharing information. So what does that look like? When they're finding information, they can engage more deeply and meaningfully if they're evaluating its usefulness, if they're evaluating its credibility and evaluating its accuracy, not just taking it for what came off of Google. When they're using information, they need to make sure that they're using it accurately and ethically, considering their audiences, considering how they're using it. When they're creating information, are they co-constructing with teammates? Are they building a deeper understanding of multiple sources of information in order to create a co-understanding in a constructivist manner with others? And then when they're sharing information, are they sharing it responsibly? And are they sharing it with a variety of audiences? And how might that message and the way that they engage that information change with their audiences? Finding information, using information, creating information, and sharing information is also a place where Hattie, Fry, and Fisher give some great engagement opportunities. Those are on page 104 and 105 in the Distance Learning Playbook. A great thing that they also do is start to think about online and remote learning environments. When we go from that face-to-face opportunities to engage with information, what are some of those tools that might work better in a distance environment? So next, we really want to give you some time to think about the experiences that you had, increasing relevance, increasing engagement, and give you real time to dig into the Distance Learning Playbook Module 6 on engaging tasks. Thanks so much.